"Excuse me, but this clause is a trap," the black girl said, and the CEO's smile instantly faded. The conference room was all glass and tension. Morning light spilled across the long mahogany table where a dozen executives sat, their reflections sharp in the polished surface. Laptops clicked. Coffee steamed, and at the head of the table, beneath the bold silver letters reading Ellison & Bright LLP, sat CEO Charles Ellison, a man who'd built an empire on charm, precision, and power. Across from him sat Arielle Johnson, a 24-year-old legal intern who had spent the last 6 months quietly navigating a world that wasn't built for her. She was brilliant but soft-spoken, confident but cautious, the only black woman in the room, and the youngest by far. Today, the air felt different. Something big was happening. The firm was about to finalize a billion-dollar contract between Ellison & Bright's corporate client, Heliotech Energy, and a small, family-owned manufacturing company from Ohio. It was supposed to be a partnership, but everyone in the room knew what it really was: a takeover. Charles Ellison leaned back in his leather chair, his voice smooth as silk. "So, ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is history in the making. Once they sign, Heliotech gains full manufacturing control, and their patents. Legal has confirmed the clause language, yes?" A few nods. Some murmured approvals. Arielle flipped through her binder, her fingers pausing on a section highlighted in yellow. Something wasn't right. Her chest tightened. She read the clause again, then again. Her mentor's voice echoed in her head. If something feels wrong, it probably is. It was there, tucked into the fine print like poison sugar. A hidden clause that would strip the small company of all ownership if profits didn't meet a certain margin within 90 days. It wasn't a partnership. It was a trap. Her heart pounded. Her voice wanted to stay silent, the way it had been trained to. Deferential, polite, invisible. But something inside her said no. Charles was smiling for the press photographers waiting outside. "All right, let's finalize this," Amara's voice cut through. "Excuse me," heads turned. The room froze. Her voice shook slightly but held firm. "Excuse me, but this clause—" "It's a trap," Charles's smile faltered. The kind of smile that wasn't used to being interrupted, much less challenged by an intern. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" She swallowed hard. "This clause, Section 14B, it nullifies profit sharing if projections fall short within the first quarter. But the profit margin is based on Heliotech's estimates, not the partner's actual numbers. That means the smaller company could lose everything: their patents, their independence, even their family legacy." A silence stretched like a held breath. Charles's jaw tightened. "That's standard language," and he said, dismissive. "We've used it before." "Maybe," Arielle said softly. "But it's wrong." The word hung heavy in the air. One of the senior partners cleared his throat. "Arielle, I'm sure you mean well, but we don't question the CEO in meetings like these." Her cheeks burned. For a second, she wanted to sink into her chair and disappear. But she pictured her mother's hands, calloused from working 2 jobs, always telling her, "Baby, your voice is your truth. Don't ever let anyone take that." She straightened her spine. "Sir, with respect, I reviewed the small company's background. It's a family-run operation. They signed on trust. They don't have corporate lawyers or financial advisors. They'll never see this coming." Charles leaned forward, his eyes cool. "Ms. Johnson, are you accusing this firm of unethical conduct?" Her heart thundered. "I'm saying we can do better than this." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Charles smiled, a thin, practiced smile. "Noted," he said curtly. "We'll handle it internally." He turned back to the room. "Let's move on," but they couldn't. The room had shifted. Her words had settled into the silence like a stone in still water, impossible to ignore. The fallout later that afternoon, Arielle sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen. Her hands trembled slightly. She'd spoken the truth, but at what cost? Her supervisor, Mr. Lee, appeared at her cubicle. "The CEO wants to see you," he said quietly. Her stomach dropped. She walked into Charles's office, a fortress of glass, wood, and expensive art. He didn't look up immediately. When he did, his eyes were unreadable. "Sit," she did. "Do you know what you did in there?" he asked calmly. Arielle nodded. "I spoke up. You embarrassed my team," he said. "In front of clients, partners, the press. I told the truth. He paused, studying her. You think the truth pays the bills here? She hesitated. No, sir. But it's what builds trust. Something flickered across his face and the faintest sign of emotion. He leaned back, exhaling. You've got guts. I'll give you that. But you have no idea how this business works. Amara met his gaze steadily. Then maybe that's the problem. Charles blinked, a moment of stunned silence. Then he dismissed her with a wave. You can go. She walked out, expecting that to be the end of her internship. 3 days later, it wasn't. 3 days later, Heliotech's CEO, an older woman named Dr. Evelyn Cruz, called Charles Ellison directly. I reviewed the contract your team drafted, she said. There's a clause I didn't approve, one that would have destroyed the small partner. A young woman in your firm caught it. She's sharp and honest. I want her in our next negotiation. Charles froze. That afternoon, he called Amara back into his office. This time, he was standing by the window, looking out over the city. Close the door, he said. When she did, he turned to face her. There was no arrogance now, just quiet reflection. I spoke with Dr. Cruz, he said. She appreciated your integrity. Amara's brows lifted slightly. She did? He nodded slowly. She said it's rare to find someone who still believes in doing what's right instead of what's easy. A pause. Then he said softly, so do I. For the first time, his voice wasn't the CEO's voice. It was just a man's tired human. You were right about the clause. I didn't write it myself, but I signed off without reading it carefully. I've been in this business too long to pretend that's okay. Amara didn't gloat. She just nodded respectfully. Thank you for saying that, sir. He smiled faintly. You remind me of someone I used to know. My mother. She ran a corner store. Lost it because of a contract like that. Maybe that's why your words hit me harder than I expected. The air softened. Charles stepped forward. I'm promoting you to junior associate, effective immediately. And I want you on every ethics review from now on. Deal. Amara blinked, stunned. Sir, thank you. He extended his hand. No, Ms. Johnson, thank you. A ripple of change over the next year, things began to shift. The firm, once known for ruthless efficiency, began building a reputation for fairness. Contracts got cleaner. Clients started referring to Ellison and Bright not just as powerful, but principled. And at the center of it all was Amara, the intern who refused to stay silent. She never sought credit. She didn't boast or post online, but word spread quietly as good stories do. Her name became a kind of whisper, the girl who told the truth. Months later, she received a handwritten note from Dr. Cruz. In business, people forget that behind every clause is a heartbeat. You reminded us all. Never lose that. Amara kept the note pinned above her desk. Every time she faced a hard choice, she'd glance at it and remember that day. The day she chose courage over comfort. 2 years later, Charles Ellison stood on a stage at a corporate ethics summit. Delivering a keynote to hundreds of CEOs, he told the story, not about his power or his deals, but about the day a young black intern challenged him in front of everyone. He didn't name her out of respect, but his words filled the room with reverence. She taught me something I should have never forgotten, he said. That leadership without conscience is just control. And that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply says, excuse me, but this clause is a trap. The crowd gave a standing ovation. From her seat in the back, Amara smiled through tears, epilogue years later. When Amara became a partner at Ellison and Bright, she rewrote the company's mission statement herself. It read, integrity isn't an option, it's the foundation. And every new intern, on their first day, received a card with a quote printed in bold letters. If you see injustice, speak, even if your voice shakes. Final message, the power of humanity doesn't always roar in protest or break chains in public squares. Sometimes it lives quietly in a boardroom, in the courage to say this isn't right. Even when every instinct tells you to stay quiet. Kindness isn't weakness. Integrity isn't naivete. And one honest voice, even when small, can echo through walls built on silence. Because when truth speaks, the world listens. Excuse me, but this clause is a trap, the black girl said. and the CEO's smile instantly faded. Part 2, continuation. The air in the glass-walled boardroom thickened. You could almost hear the fluorescent lights hum as silence settled after her words. Every pair of eyes, men in tailored suits, women with tablets poised mid-note, shifted to her. The CEO, Richard Langston, blinked once. His easy grin faltered. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone polite but icy. "Did you just say a trap?" Ava's pulse raced, but her voice remained calm. "Yes, sir. This clause right here, Section 7B. It's written to transfer the vendor's intellectual property rights to Langston Corp. after 6 months of integration support. It's disguised as a technical safeguard, but legally, it means you're taking their entire algorithm." Gasps rippled through the room. A few junior staff looked down at their papers, trying to appear invisible. Richard's jaw tightened. "That's standard practice in mergers." Ava met his gaze. "No, sir. It's theft, just with prettier words." Her words landed like a thunderclap. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Richard leaned back, studying her. "And what do you suggest we do, Miss Taylor?" "Ava Taylor." "Well, Miss Taylor," he said, a smirk ghosting his lips again, "you seem passionate, but business isn't about feelings. It's about leverage." Ava's hands trembled under the table, but her conviction didn't waver. "With respect, sir, business is also about integrity. The moment we sacrifice that, we lose everything that makes us worth trusting." For a long time, Richard said nothing. Then he stood abruptly. Meeting adjourned. Everyone scattered like startled birds, whispering as they filed out. When the door clicked shut, Richard turned toward the window overlooking Manhattan. "Do you have any idea what that clause was worth?" he asked quietly. Ava swallowed hard. "Yes, and I also know what your name is worth. I just didn't want to see you lose it." He turned slowly. The faintest hint of respect glimmered behind his measured stare. "You're new here, 2 months, and already lecturing me on ethics." "I wasn't lecturing," she said softly. "I was protecting." He didn't answer, but she saw it. The flicker of realization in his eyes. The kind that happens when someone, for the first time in a long while, sees the truth instead of profit. Later, that night, Ava stayed late, her desk lamp the only light left in the quiet office. Her inbox buzzed. A new message from the CEO's assistant. "Miss Taylor, Mr. Langston requests your presence at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Boardroom." Her stomach nodded. She knew what that meant. Maybe she'd gone too far. Maybe her honesty had crossed the line between brave and reckless. She closed her laptop and whispered to herself, "Even if I lose this job, at least I told the truth." The next morning, when she walked into the boardroom, Richard was already there. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him sat an older black woman in a navy blue suit, with kind eyes and a quiet smile. "Ava," Richard said, motioning for her to sit. "This is Dr. Evelyn Brooks, our new chief ethics officer. I asked her to review the merger contract you flagged yesterday." Evelyn nodded at Ava. "I read your notes. Impressive analysis." "You are absolutely right," Ava blinked, stunned. "Thank you, ma'am," Richard cleared his throat. "You'll also be happy to know that we're scrapping the clause." Her heart thudded. "We are," he nodded. "And we're drafting a new transparency policy. You'll help Dr. Brooks lead it." Ava's lips parted in disbelief. "Sir, Richard raised a hand. "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you did yesterday, because that's the kind of courage this company's been missing." For the first time since joining the firm, Ava smiled, not out of politeness but from genuine hope. Weeks later, the Transparency Initiative, co-led by Ava and Dr. Brooks, became the company's most talked-about reform. They trained employees to spot unethical loopholes, restructured contracts to ensure fairness, and launched a mentorship program for young women in law and business. But the biggest change wasn't written in a memo. It was in how people started looking at one another. There was more listening, more seeing. Richard began attending the workshops himself. One day after a session, he pulled Ava aside. "You know," he said, "that clause was worth millions. You cost us a small fortune." Ava's stomach twisted, until she saw the glint in his eyes. "Best loss I ever took," he finished. They both laughed. The twist months later, Ava received a call from a small startup, Neurolex, the company whose algorithm she'd unknowingly saved from being stolen. The founder, a middle-aged man named Aaron Chu, thanked her. "We heard what you did. You probably don't even know us, but that clause would have destroyed our company. I was just doing my job," she said modestly. "No," Aaron replied. "You were doing what was right. And that's rarer." He paused, then added, "We're expanding. We'd love for you to consult with us on ethical compliance. You'd be shaping how tech treats people, not just profits." Ava was speechless. I'd be honored." When she hung up, she sat quietly for a long time, smiling through tears. Final scene, 1 year later. At a global business ethics summit in Washington, D.C., Ava stood at the podium. Behind her, a banner read, "Integrity is innovation." She looked out at hundreds of faces, executives, students, journalists. "I was once the girl who thought no one in power wanted to listen," she began. "But I learned that truth, when spoken with courage, can make even the highest walls tremble." The clause I questioned wasn't just a legal trap, it was a moral one, and choosing to challenge it changed everything. The room fell silent. "Never underestimate your voice," Ava continued. "Even if you're the youngest in the room. Even if you're the only one who sees the wrong, because doing what's right will always outlast what's profitable." Applause erupted, thunderous and genuine. Among the crowd, Richard Langston stood and clapped slowly, a proud smile spreading across his face. And somewhere in the front row, Dr. Evelyn Brooks whispered to the young interns beside her, "That's what leadership looks like." Epilogue. The legacy of seeing Ava's story spread far beyond her company. Business schools taught her case as the clause that changed corporate ethics. Her quote, "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap," became a rallying cry for whistleblowers, young professionals, and anyone daring to speak truth to power. Years later, when Ava opened her own consulting firm, she hung a single framed plaque on her office wall. It read, "Integrity isn't about being fearless, it's about choosing what's right, even when it costs you everything." And beneath it, in smaller letters, dedicated to every voice that spoke up when silence was easier. The world didn't change overnight, but it was changing, one brave word at a time. 2 years had passed since that day in the boardroom, the day Ava Taylor had stood up to a CEO and rewritten the course of her career. Langston Corp had transformed. What began as a policy had become a movement. The Transparency Initiative was now a global standard studied in universities and adopted by dozens of Fortune 500 companies. Employees called it the Ava effect, but Ava wasn't interested in fame. She'd left Langston Corp to start Clarity Ethics Consulting, a small firm with a big mission, to make fairness a cornerstone of business, not a footnote. Still, some nights when the office was quiet and city lights flickered through her window, she wondered if the fight would ever really end. Chapter 1. The Invitation. It was late one Thursday when her assistant, Jamie, knocked on her door. "You might want to see this," she said, holding out a letter sealed with a golden crest. Ava frowned. "What is it?" "An invitation from Global One Technologies. They're hosting the World Ethics and Innovation Forum in Dubai, and they want you to keynote." Ava raised her eyebrows. Global One was one of the world's most powerful corporations, and one of the most controversial. They'd been accused of exploiting overseas workers and burying environmental violations under complex legal jargon. "They want me?" Ava asked, skeptical. Jamie nodded. "Apparently their CEO requested you personally." "Someone named Victor Kroll." Ava's heart skipped. "Victor Kroll, the youngest tech billionaire in the world. Ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. If he was calling her, it wasn't just for optics. Something was wrong." Chapter 2. The Flight on the Plane. Ava reread the message Global One's team had sent. "We're restructuring our corporate code and need external insight. Your work aligns with our vision for responsible innovation." It sounded polished. Too polished. She'd learned to hear the lies between the lines. As the plane cut through clouds, Ava remembered Loretta James's quote, one she'd once carried on a laminated card. "Respect isn't optional. It's the least we owe each other." She whispered the words like a mantra. "Whatever this is, I'll see it clearly." Chapter 3. The meeting Dubai shimmered in the sun like a dream made of gold and glass. But inside Global One's headquarters, everything felt colder. Steel walls, minimalist decor, no trace of warmth. Victor Kroll greeted her with a firm handshake. "Miss Taylor." "An honor, thank you," Ava replied, guarded. "I appreciate the invitation." He smiled thinly. "You've built quite a reputation. Integrity, transparency, courage. Exactly what I need. What for?" Victor gestured to a massive digital model projected on the wall. "This, Project Aurora, an AI platform that will revolutionize business ethics, predicting moral risks before they happen." Ava studied the hologram. "Sounds ambitious. But what's the catch?" He grinned. "There's always a catch, isn't there? Let's just say, some of my board thinks transparency slows progress. I disagree. I want you to prove them wrong." She frowned. "And what happens if I can't?" "Then Aurora becomes a profit tool instead of a protection one, and the world loses something priceless." Ava smiled softly. "No, sir. I regret that it was necessary." Chapter 8. The world listens. The hearing sparked global reform. Governments adopted AI ethics transparency laws. Tech giants began publishing open audits. And Ava, once an unknown analyst, became a world leader in ethical innovation. When a reporter later asked how she'd found the courage, she said, "By remembering the people who came before me. The ones who taught me that truth has a cost, but so does silence." Epilogue, a light that doesn't dim 5 years later. In a quiet ceremony at Langston University, a new scholarship was announced, the Ava Taylor Fellowship for Ethical Leadership. On the stage, Naomi, now a law student, read aloud from Ava's own words. "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap." She paused, smiling through tears. Those words didn't just expose corruption. They reminded the world that one voice, just one, can start a revolution of conscience. From the front row, Ava watched quietly, eyes shimmering. She didn't see herself as a hero, just someone who refused to stop seeing. As the crowd stood in applause, she whispered under her breath, softly, for no one but herself to hear. "Respect isn't optional. It never was." And outside, in the late evening light, it felt as if the world was finally learning to see.